Imagine your arms tied to one end of a wooden frame, your legs to the other, and then they start turning the wheel, slowly, deliberately. With every crank, your joints scream, your shoulders tear from their sockets, your hips dislocate, and your spine stretches beyond what the human body was ever meant to bear. Commanding, metallic, but it was death disguised as a seat. The iron chair was covered in hundreds of spikes. On the seat, the back, the armrests, even the footrest. The victim was stripped and strapped in tight. Movement was impossible. Then, the real horror began. Coals were lit beneath the chair. As the iron heated, the spikes didn't just pierce, they burned, slowly. The metal branded the skin, roasted the muscles, cooked the flesh from within. Some victims died from blood loss, others from infection, but the worst were kept alive, hour after hour, stewing in their own pain. You'd feel the burn almost instantly. In 30 seconds, the spikes would sizzle against your skin. You'd thrash, but the more you moved, the deeper the spikes dug in. Blood would run, skin would blister, and the chair would only get hotter. They didn't just want pain, they wanted patience, forced stillness in the face of unrelenting fire. The iron chair turned the human body into meat on a spit. And in that medieval kitchen of cruelty, you were always the main course. It looked like a statue, an imposing bronze bull with a hollow chamber inside, but it was no work of art. The victim was forced through a small trapdoor and locked inside. Then, a fire was lit beneath the bull's belly. Slowly, unbearably, the metal began to heat. Skin blistered, lungs filled with smoke, flesh roasted while the person was still alive. But the cruelty didn't stop there. The bull was designed so that screams echoed through tubes in its head, emerging as chilling, bull-like groans. The torturer and the crowd heard music. The victim, only agony. It was used by tyrants like Phalaris of Sicily, who supposedly tested it on its own inventor. Once the metal reached full heat, death came, but not quickly. It could take hours. Bones blackened, organs boiled, and all the while, the crowd listened to the eerie song of human suffering. You'd barely survive 30 seconds before your skin began to melt. Breathing would feel like swallowing fire, and as the world outside listened to your moans, no one would see your tears. Inside the belly of the bull, a wooden pyramid, sharp at the tip, ropes tied to your ankles. You're stripped naked, hoisted above the point, and slowly, ever so slowly, lowered onto it. This is the Judas cradle. The tip enters your anus or vagina. Your own body weight becomes the torture. Every movement, every tremor of muscle or breath forces you deeper onto the spike. The skin splits, the muscles tear, infection follows, and if the torturer was feeling particularly cruel, they'd rock you or add weights to speed the agony. Victims sometimes lasted hours, even days, but not without screaming, not without begging. It was designed to humiliate as much as hurt. Done publicly, crowds watched as bodies trembled and bled on the wooden point. You, sitting there for 30 seconds, would feel unimaginable pressure. Pain would explode through your pelvis. Every second would feel like a blade being driven higher. You wouldn't last a minute without passing out, or worse. The Judas cradle didn't need flames or blades, just time. And in medieval torture, time was the sharpest weapon of all. Small, simple, terrifying. The thumbscrew was a compact torture device. 2 metal bars with grooves tightened by turning a screw. The victim's fingers or thumbs were placed between the bars. As the screw turned, bones splintered, nails split, blood oozed through shattered skin. It wasn't meant to kill, that was the point. The thumbscrew was a tool of interrogation, quick, portable, and excruciating, perfect for squeezing out confessions without the mess of larger devices. It could be used on toes too, or even genitals in crueler hands. You'd think a little pressure on a thumb couldn't do much, but after 10 seconds, pain shoots up the arm like fire. After 20, nerves rupture. After 30, you'd either scream the truth or scream anything to make it stop. No one walked away whole. In medieval courtrooms and dungeons, justice was measured not in fairness, but in pressure applied to flesh and bone. And with a simple twist of the wrist, the thumbscrew could turn a silent man into a broken one. It was small, brutal, precise. The knee splitter looked like 2 thick metal plates lined with jagged spikes, connected by a screw. The victim's knee was placed between them. Then the torturer turned the handle. Slowly, each twist crushed cartilage, drove spikes through tendons, shattered the kneecap. Ligaments tore apart like rope under strain. The knee didn't just break, it exploded inward. Used on heretics, thieves, or runaway slaves, it left victims permanently crippled. Many died from infection days later. Others were left crawling for the rest of their lives, if they even survived the first scream. 30 seconds? That's enough for the first full rotation. The crunch of bone, the snap of sinew. You'd feel your leg give way, your body collapse, your mind retreat into darkness. There was no walking away from the knee splitter. It didn't just destroy your legs, it destroyed your ability to run, resist, or ever escape again. It was torture designed to last beyond the pain. And long after the screams stopped, your silence limped on. If the rack pulled you apart, the scavenger's daughter did the opposite. It crushed you inward, folding your body like paper until bones cracked and blood vessels burst. Invented in the Tower of London, this iron frame forced the victim into a crouched position. The head was pushed down, knees pulled up, arms bound tight. Then the device was locked, squeezing everything inward. It compressed the chest, abdomen, and limbs so tightly, blood would gush from the nose, ears, and eyes. It was suffocation without air restriction. Organs pressed against bone. Breathing became a war. Passing out was a mercy. It was used on prisoners who refused to speak. And by the end of 30 seconds, almost no one could speak, only whimper, moan, or black out. You'd feel ribs creak, your skull throb, your spine scream for space it would never get. They didn't need fire or spikes here, just cold, steady pressure. And the terrifying realization that your own body, your bones, your lungs, your blood, was the weapon turning against you. Step inside a human-shaped coffin. Now imagine the doors slowly swinging shut, not with a slam, but with a cold final click. Lining the interior, dozens of metal spikes. But here's the twist. They're not meant to pierce your heart. No, the spikes are carefully placed to avoid vital organs, skewering your limbs, your back, even your eyes, but keeping you alive. The goal wasn't to kill you quickly. It was to let you die in agony, inch by inch, breath by breath. Some versions had spikes laced with poison or rust, ensuring infection set in fast. Historians debate whether the Iron Maiden was truly used in the Middle Ages or a later invention, but stories persist of victims locked inside for hours, bleeding out into the metal floor, their screams muffled by thick iron. Imagine the darkness, the air thick with blood and sweat. You can't move, you can't scream loud enough, you can only feel the slow, creeping arrival of death. 30 seconds inside, you'd be begging for release, but the Maiden never released anyone. It looked like a necklace, but this was no ornament. The spiked collar was a ring of iron lined with inward-facing blades. Once locked around your neck, it became a prison of steel. You couldn't sit, couldn't lie down, couldn't move your head. If you did, the spikes stabbed into your throat, your jaw, your spine. Talking? Out of the question. Swallowing? Painful. Sleeping? Impossible. People were left wearing it for days. They stood upright or leaned against walls until their legs gave out. And when they fell, the collar punished them, piercing arteries, choking them with their own blood. Inquisitors used it on suspected witches and heretics. It didn't leave large wounds, but it crushed the mind. 30 seconds in, your muscles would cramp. Sweat would sting your eyes, your body would instinctively shift, and that's when the spikes would sink in. Tiny punctures, sudden blood, shock. It wasn't a dramatic torture, it was slow, patient suffering, the kind that didn't scream for attention. It just waited for you to break. It was slow, it was obscene, and it was deliberately unforgettable. Impalement began with a single sharpened stake. The victim was forced down onto it, sometimes through the rectum, sometimes the vagina, even the abdomen. Gravity did the rest. The stake was deliberately blunted so it wouldn't kill too fast. Instead, it pushed organs aside, sliding between ribs and muscle, emerging, sometimes, through the shoulder, chest, or mouth. They didn't do it in secret. They did it high above cities, where bodies hung for days, silent, twisted, leaking blood. Vlad the Impaler, yes, that Vlad, perfected it as a message. Whole forests of bodies would line roads into Wallachia. Enemies turned back in horror. 30 seconds, you'd feel the wood split you open. The scream wouldn't even come, your breath stolen by agony. You'd beg for death. But impalement wasn't about death. It was about display. They didn't need judges or trials, just a stake, and the will to drive it through you. Because in the medieval world, fear was the greatest weapon of all. A massive pot, water, oil, tar, or even molten lead, and a man lowered slowly into its depths. Boiling wasn't just a method of execution, it was a ritual of pain. Victims were tied by the waist and lowered inch by inch into the bubbling liquid. Feet blistered first, then the shins peeled open, skin sloughed off in strips, muscles cooked, bones steamed. It could take minutes to die, sometimes hours, if the pot was heated slowly. You wouldn't pass out right away. No, you'd feel everything. The heat crawling up your body, your flesh turning to soup, your lungs filling with the smell of your own boiling blood. In England under Henry VIII, poisoners were sometimes executed this way. In France and the Holy Roman Empire too, it was a favorite for traitors and counterfeiters. In 30 seconds, your lower legs would already be ruined. The nerves would scream louder than your mouth ever could. You'd want to die, but the pot wasn't done yet. Boiling erased identity, face, and flesh alike. This is the rack, medieval Europe's most infamous instrument of agony. First used in the Tower of London, it was the weapon of choice for torturers seeking both confessions and spectacle. Victims weren't just pulled, they were unraveled. Bones cracked like twigs, tendons snapped like violin strings. Some passed out before they talked. Others remained conscious as their limbs tore apart, refusing to give in. But you'd last maybe 30 seconds before the pain overwhelmed your body, shutting it down in a haze of blinding white. And this was only one method. There were dozens more, each designed not just to punish, but to break the soul. Welcome to the darkest corners of medieval justice, where pain was power and mercy was a myth. It bore the name of a saint, but there was nothing holy about it. The Catherine wheel was a massive wooden wheel, sometimes from a cart, used to break the body in the most public, most horrifying way. The victim was tied down, arms and legs stretched across the spokes. Then came the hammer, one blow for each limb. Bones crushed, joints shattered, the wheel spun to expose fresh flesh. Some torturers wove the broken limbs through the gaps, contorting the victim into unnatural, grotesque shapes. They didn't always kill you right away. Some were left there, high on a pole, alive but twisted, screaming for hours or days, slowly dying in the wind and sun. It was a spectacle meant to terrify the masses. 30 seconds, one bone would already be broken, blood would pour, the screams would begin, and yet, it was just the opening act. The Catherine wheel was not just torture, it was a stage, and your broken body was the performance. Forged from iron and hatred, the breast ripper was designed specifically for women. The device had 4 sharp metal claws, curved like a beast's talons. Heated in a fire until red hot, it was then clamped onto a woman's breast. With a violent pull, it ripped flesh away from the chest wall. There was no purpose beyond cruelty, no confession to extract, no chance of survival. It was used on women accused of adultery, abortion, heresy, or even speaking too boldly. The message was simple: your body is not yours. The pain, indescribable. Nerves burst, blood gushed. The shock alone could kill. If it didn't, infection surely would. Victims who lived bore the scars for life, physically and mentally shattered. 30 seconds with the breast ripper wouldn't just break your body, it would destroy your will. The smell of burning flesh, the sound of metal tearing skin, the silence that followed. In the medieval world, torture wasn't just punishment, it was control. And the breast ripper reminded everyone, step out of line and they will come for your body first. It was small, just a metal rod with 2 sharp prongs on each end, but once strapped between the chest and the chin, or between the neck and sternum, it became a prison of silence. The heretic's fork was meant for thinkers, speakers, doubters, those accused of heresy. It didn't slice or burn, it didn't break bones, but it forced stillness. The prongs dug into your flesh. Any movement, any nod, twitch, or flinch drove the points deeper. Swallowing hurt, breathing was agony, and sleep impossible. If you nodded off, the spikes would pierce your throat or jaw. Slowly, fatally, victims were left to stand for days, tied upright, forbidden to speak. The pain wasn't sudden, it was patient, creeping. It fed on your instincts, your need to move, to rest, to simply survive. In 30 seconds, your throat would already throb, your chin would tremble. Blood might bead from tiny punctures, but that was only the beginning. Because the real torture of the heretic's fork wasn't the pain, it was the silence, and the unbearable weight of having no escape but your own body betraying you. No blades to stab, no ropes to stretch, just a razor-sharp knife in your skin, slowly peeled away while you screamed. Flaying was the art of removing the skin from a living body. The torturer would start small, a strip from the arm, the chest, or the back, then more. Layer by layer, your body was opened, not to kill immediately, but to unravel you. Muscles twitched, nerves pulsed, blood poured. It was methodical, deliberate, a display of complete control. Sometimes they'd flay only the face, leaving you alive, blind, and unrecognizable. In other cases, they'd flay you completely and hang the skin like a warning. Assyrians, medieval kings, even the Inquisition reportedly used it to terrify their enemies. You'd feel every slice, the breeze against exposed flesh, the sting of air on muscle, and after 30 seconds, you wouldn't be thinking of mercy, you'd be praying for death. This was no accident of war. It was theater, a message carved into the skin of a human being, and in the eyes of the torturer, your agony was just part of the performance. At first glance, it looked simple, just wooden or iron frames clamped around a victim's lower legs. But once locked in place, the real torment began. Wedges were driven between the boot and the shins. With each hammer blow, the wood pressed inward, bones cracked, shins splintered. Sometimes the executioner kept driving until the bones pulverized into pulp, ligaments tore, blood vessels burst, the foot would twist unnaturally. Some never walked again, if they lived at all. It wasn't always heated or spiked, it didn't need to be. Pain radiated upward, shooting through nerves like lightning. Some versions even used fire, baking the flesh within the iron shell. The smell of burning skin, mixed with the sickening crack of bones, was unforgettable. You'd barely last 30 seconds before blacking out or vomiting from shock, but they wouldn't stop. The boot wasn't meant to kill, it was meant to extract. Secrets, names, lies, anything. The boot turned strong men into pleading husks, and it reminded everyone watching that once the wedge started driving in, no one left whole. They called it breaking on the wheel. It was slow, it was loud, and it was horrifying. The victim was tied to a large wooden cartwheel, arms and legs spread across its spokes. Then came the club. The executioner swung it with precision, smashing bones one by one, not to kill, oh no, but to shatter. Limbs bent the wrong way, joints burst open, flesh turned purple with internal bleeding. Sometimes they'd weave the broken limbs through the spokes, twisting the body into impossible shapes. Then they'd raise the wheel vertically and leave the mangled victim to die in the sun, sometimes over days, thirsty, delirious, moaning in pain. This was spectacle. Crowds watched, cheered, gasped. The wheel wasn't just torture, it was theater. 30 seconds in, you'd hear your own leg snap. Then the arm, you'd scream, you'd choke on the pain. Your body would no longer feel like your own. This wasn't justice, this was dominance. And on the wheel, mercy was never an option, only bone, blood, and the long, slow unraveling of a life. It started with a rope, your ankles tied and your body hoisted upside down. Blood rushed to your head, keeping you conscious longer than you'd wish. Then came the saw. 2 executioners would begin at your groin and work downward, slowly, deliberately. The blade carved through skin, muscle, and bone, sometimes stopping at the abdomen to prolong the agony. The inverted position made it worse. Gravity kept you alive, flooding your brain with oxygen as your body was cleaved in half. This wasn't about confessions, it was about humiliation and spectacle. Heretics, traitors, or anyone deemed dangerous might face the saw, publicly, as a warning. 30 seconds in, you'd feel the steel biting into bone. Screams would rise from your throat as your pelvis cracked. Blood would pour, but you'd still be conscious, still aware, still feeling everything. This was the kind of death they reserved for those they hated most. And with each slice, your humanity was stripped away, until only the crowd remained and the saw kept moving. They start with a metal bucket, then a rat, then you. The torturer straps the open end of the bucket to your bare stomach or chest. Inside, a starving rat, desperate to escape. Then, they heat the closed end of the bucket with fire or hot coals. Panicked, the rat does what rats do best. It digs. With nowhere else to go, it claws, bites, and chews through the only escape route, your flesh. First the skin, then the fat, then muscle, organs if it gets far enough, all while you're wide awake. It's not quick, it's not clean, it's panic-forged pain, a primal kind of horror, the kind that turns screams into howls and thoughts into static. In 30 seconds, the rat would already be burrowing. You'd feel the claws beneath your ribs, the sharp teeth carving tunnels into your body, the heat behind the bucket rising, and the realization, you're not being eaten, you're being escaped through. The rat didn't hate you, but it would do anything to live. And in that moment, your body was just the tunnel. It looked innocent enough, small, metallic, shaped like a pear, but once inserted into the mouth, the vagina, or the rectum, it became a device of pure horror. The pear of anguish was twisted open with a screw, its metal petals slowly expanding inside the victim. In the mouth, it tore the jaw apart. In the rectum, it ruptured intestines. In the vagina, it shredded soft tissue. The pain beyond words. Nerves screamed, muscles ripped, blood poured. This device wasn't for extracting confessions, it was punishment. For blasphemers, for women accused of witchcraft or adultery, for those who dared speak against power. Most didn't survive long once it was fully expanded, but they weren't meant to. Imagine 30 seconds with this thing opening inside you, your body convulsing, your mind collapsing under the sheer violation of it. No clean death, no mercy, just metal and muscle and agony. And then, silence. They called it justice, but it was vengeance disguised as virtue. And for the victim, there was no escape, only the unbearable wait for death to come. It looked like a simple claw, curved, made of iron, with 4 hooked prongs. But in the hands of a torturer, it became a weapon of raw destruction. The Spanish tickler wasn't used to tickle, it was used to tear, flesh, muscle, sometimes even bone. Victims were stripped naked and tied down. Then the tickler, cold or red hot, was raked across the body, the chest, the arms, the thighs. Each pull gouged deep trenches in the skin. Arteries burst, muscles split open. Some versions were designed to pull out ribs or rip apart joints. This device didn't aim for a quick death. It aimed to disfigure, to humiliate, to leave you in such a state that even death looked merciful. 30 seconds, that's 1 stroke down the ribs, another across the belly, a third carving down the thigh. By then, you'd be drowning in blood, shock taking over, mind unraveling. And yet the tickler would keep moving, dragging, scraping, ripping. You weren't just being tortured, you were being unmade. Spoke against the crown, preached heresy, cursed a noble, they wouldn't argue, they'd silence you with steel. The tongue tearer was a brutal device, a metal pincer designed to grasp the tongue. Victims had their mouths pried open with iron gags. The tearer clamped down on the tongue's base, then ripped, clean off if you were lucky, torn halfway if you weren't. There was no clean slice, no surgical mercy, just muscle ripping, veins bursting, blood choking the throat. Victims often drowned in their own fluids. Others lived, mutilated and unable to ever speak again. 30 seconds, that's all it took. Clamp, yank, scream, then gurgling silence. The pain would be instant, the panic overwhelming, the shock paralyzing. But worst of all, the knowledge that your voice was gone. Forever. You were punished not with death, but with silence. A message to others, speak again and the same will follow. The tongue tearer didn't need an executioner's axe. It only needed your words to make you bleed.